FEC data shows that some senior citizens across the U.S. have been donating thousands of times per year. Some of these individuals' names and addresses are attached to over $200,000 in contributions. We went and knocked on a few of their doors to corroborate the data that we received from a group of citizen journalists called Election Watch in Maryland. We're wondering if these donors are victims of what appears to be a money laundering scheme, or these residents actually participated in the scheme, or making phone calls, or knocking on doors. These are things that you can do. We hope you do that. Follow me along and see what happens. This is something that you guys can do. Very easy to do. A lot of homes with bizarre amounts of data showing tens of thousands of contributions made through different contributors here. So a lot of questions, and we hope the Citizen Journalism Army at OMG can answer them. This is an easy thing to do. Knocking on doors, asking questions. Get yourself a little microphone, get yourself a camera. You can use an iPhone. Contributed 3,000 contributions for $32,000. The FEC records indicate that you donated $32,000, 3,000 different contributions people made at this address in your name. Are you aware of that happening? You're not aware of that happening?
Talk to Donald Trump.
Talk to Donald Trump? Well, how would Donald Trump help me answer that question?
Hit him with a bat.
Hit Donald Trump with a bat?
Yeah, right over the head.
How would that help me answer this question?
It would certainly keep you in the news.
To do with
I
it.
want to see a scar on his fucking head. Now stop fucking with me.
Whoa. Whoa.
It's been an interesting week in political terrorism. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Rescue Michigan live stream. We got a packed house tonight. Patty's back. Shane Trejo is back after a too long hiatus. And I mean, you've been doing your own thing, Shane. We'll definitely need to give us an update on the other crazy stuff that's been going on in your world for the last few weeks. And we have another returning guest. Jeff Phillips is here tonight to talk about some very interesting stories in the news today. But real quick, of course, that clip was from James O'Keefe, who used to run Project Veritas, which is apparently chose to kick him off of the board. And so he started his own media group. And
OMG.
OMG, great name for it. That was the first story they broke, that apparently Democrats have a massive money laundering scheme whereby, you know, just random people are donating thousands and thousands and thousands of times a year, which certainly seems plausible to me, right? I mean, you guys are political people. You donate 10, 15 times a day, don't you?
All the time. I have an alarm set every hour. Yeah.
Yeah.
Patriotic duty to do so.
Yeah. But amazing illustrative response from the Democrat donors door they knocked on. Hey, sir, do you know why you've made, are you aware that you've been making thousands and thousands of donations to Democrats? I want to kill Donald Trump.
Ask Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Wow.
People are psychos. And of course, that's been like the theme of this week is they can't help themselves. They are just so obsessed with destroying Trump. Any amount of violence, anything at all, nothing's beyond the pale. But speaking of that, Jeff, I wanted to go to you first because you've got some interesting information that I thought might be something our audience might want to find out a little bit about. With all the crazy stuff going on in the news this week, we actually did a show on Friday to cover some of it. There was so much to talk about. One of the stories that might have slipped through the cracks that you might not have heard about was that Senator Rand Paul's staffer was brutally assaulted earlier this week, almost killed, but apparently is making a recovery. And if we look at some of the news coverage about the incident, let me pull it up here. Let me just share my screen. Let's see here. Here's a story from, we'll go to this one first. Here's a story from Breitbart. And this is actually an interesting angle they put on this. Suspect accused of stabbing Rand Paul staffer freed from prison early thanks to the GOP-backed First Step Act. The suspect accused of brutally stabbing a staffer for Senator Rand Paul had been released early from prison thanks to the First Step Act, which was approved by then Republican-controlled Congress in 2018, signed into law by Donald Trump, which, of course, Donald Trump and the Republicans all praised as being awesome and wonderful and great. The article goes on to note more than 7,500 convicts have been released early from federal prison thanks to the First Step Act, including violent criminals, those convicted of sex crimes, armed robberies, murder, assault, and weapon offenses. And this guy was out for less than 1 day, I believe it was, before he brutally assaulted and nearly murdered Senator Paul Staffer, which I don't think I see it in this story, where they're claiming that it was a completely random attack. It just so happened that the victim was staffer for Senator Rand Paul. Here's another story. Parents of Phillip Todd, a staffer for Senator Rand Paul's office, who was randomly and brutally attacked this past weekend, said their son was in stable condition after having trauma surgery. Notice they just throw that in there. Randomly and brutally attacked this past weekend, as though...
That's Fox?
This is Fox News, yep. And everyone else reported the same way.
Okay.
Randomly attacked. Police say he was randomly attacked, and that's all. That's good enough for the media. They say he was randomly attacked. But Jeff, you're not so sure. So tell us about it. What's going on?
Well, you know, I had thought from reading a lot of the reports that I saw through that randomness as just being a real stretch. And I had a lot of questions. Now, when I went through all these different reports, my biggest question that was on my mind is where did he stay the night Friday night? Because if it was in the vicinity, that'd be a little different than if it was really far away and he sought this place out. I finally figured that out today. I finally got the address of where he stayed the night, which was in this court file I sent you. He stayed with his Miss Yolanda Neal, someone in his family. And it turns out she's only 3.1 miles away from where the restaurant was. So that kind of blows up a little bit of my suspicions and makes it a little more possible that it might have been random. But I really still think it's a stretch. And I say that for several reasons. Number one is if you think about the job that Phillip Todd had, he was not just working inside of Rand Paul's office, taking calls, sending letters, that kind of thing.
Right.
Like that. Like everybody in the news media is kind of getting the impression.
And he had a committee assignments. When you are a staffer for a member of Congress, there's typically one person who is the office's point person on any bills going through particular committees that the lawmaker serves on, and they don't serve on all that many. When I worked for Benevolio, he served on 2 committees, and I was his small business staffer, and we had someone else who was his oversight staffer. So he was the policy point person for Rand Paul's staff on, what was it? I think here. Let me see. Let me look it up.
The Committee on Homeland Security and Government Ops, but it's more than that, Adam.
Yeah.
In the U.S. Senate, the ranking member of each caucus on each committee is given additional funds in their budget for the purpose of hiring the committee aide for their caucus. So Phillip Todd was under Rand Paul's supervision, but he actually was working as the committee aide for all of the Republicans on that committee, and was to advise them all. That was how they structure it. Here in Michigan, we do that either under the speaker or under the chair of the committee. But in the U.S. Senate, they do it under both parties through the office of the ranking member. So my understanding, and I haven't worked in the U.S. Senate, so I can't be 100% sure, but my understanding is that his role was a lot more focused on the committee itself and the caucus within it, rather than just policy advising to Rand Paul in particular.
Right.
Because Rand Paul was given additional funds to hire a staff person for the whole committee's Republicans. So that position, you have the Committee on Homeland Security and Government Operations. The whole purpose of that committee is to provide the Department of Homeland Security with some meaningful oversight. So I would expect that the committee aide, which is what Phillip Todd was, would be somebody who would be digging into any shady issues or concerns that were raised within the Department of Homeland Security. And if you think about it, If anybody outside of Michigan and Kentucky were to call their U.S. Senator's office and say, hey, I've got a tip about something going on in Department of Homeland Security, what's the workflow behind the scenes? The legislative aide that receives that phone call for any other Senate office, they're going to forward it to somebody that's on the committee, probably the committee aide. And so it would probably, if they call the Republican office, it would probably get forwarded to Phil Todd and Rand Paul's office. If they called a Democrat's office, it would probably get forwarded to whoever his counterpart is that works here for Gary Peters' office, because that's how the committee aide staff is structured.
Yeah, by the way, I should cut in to let our audience know, since I didn't introduce you properly. You and I worked together in Lansing. You've worked for a lawmaker before, and you and I worked together on Ron Paul's presidential campaign. So this isn't your first rodeo. You know a little bit about how the system works in capitals.
Right. And very often when you get those calls, I used to work for Shane Hernandez's office, and very, very often when you get those calls, if the staff's able to just handle the issue, it's not everything's going to get ran by your boss, because frankly, you wouldn't have time to take 100 phone messages or summarize them all. They hire staff that are of a likewise mindset who can just deal with it. And so I think it's very possible to say that somebody could have called any other state's office of a Republican senator and could have filed a tip with their Senate office and had the staff forwarded to Phil Todd. And it might not have even gotten mentioned, or it could have gotten only a very brief mention with their actual senator from their state, especially if he's not on that committee. That's very likely. If it was a very serious issue, then they probably would have mentioned it to their boss. But if he's not on the committee, it would kind of get shrugged off as, well, I don't know what to do with this, So it wouldn't really necessarily even reach their ears unless it was something they can do something about because they're on the right committee. If they're not on the right committee, it's probably going to just get forwarded straight to Phil Todd, because very likely he might already know about it. He might already be working on that. So he's going to need to know about it. So you're going to have that conversation anyway. And if he doesn't, he needs to be. So you're still going to have that conversation either way. So it seems to me that nationwide, all of the concerns or tips brought to any Republican Senate office regarding an issue within the Department of Homeland Security is most likely going to come across Phil Todd's awareness, regardless of who they call.
When I worked in Washington and we did a bill regarding the Obamacare website, the first person we had to get in touch with was the committee staffer for the Oversight Committee.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's the central point where everything happens. Is the committee aide is going to dig into the issues. He's going to reach out to people in the department, ask them questions, ask other people, ask witnesses, perhaps, if there's someone like a contractor or something that's working very closely with or potentially able to see what's going on. Phil would probably be the one asking questions, is what I'm imagining. And he would be asking those in a more informal, off-the-record setting, kind of more exploratory, but just asking investigative questions to try to get to the bottom of what's actually happening so that he can then advise Rand Paul on a deeper level, but also all of the Republicans on that committee and their committee caucus meeting of what he has found is happening in the department. And then he's going to make a recommendation of how to make the committee's oversight process as most effective as possible, and specifically what questions need to be asked on the record that he probably already asked off the record. So that means that if somebody in the Department of Homeland Security was doing something really shady and felt like they were worried that it was going to get brought to light, well, most likely they would feel that Phil Todd was asking too many questions and would be the one that would be the first one to be on their radar of being a problem for them. So just by the nature of his position, I think that's a legitimate concern that if there was some very corrupt evil, we need to consider the scenario that it's possible that somebody might have not wanted something to come to light. Phil Todd might not have even have figured out what that is yet, but had been just simply doing his job, asking questions, figuring out what's going on. And it might have made somebody who was doing something wrong very nervous. They might have felt that he was asking too many questions and that he was getting too close to revealing something quite dangerous and something that's really shouldn't be happening. So
Yeah,
if
there's
it
been
was
a bit
that
of a cover-up regarding the origins of COVID, which Senator Paul has been,
oh
extensively
yeah, there's
working
definitely
at.
all kinds of crazy stuff going on with that, isn't there?
Yeah.
But
But
I don't know
anyway,
what.
So okay, so he's a real somebody. Still doesn't
Right.
mean it couldn't have been a random thing. But you said you found some other stuff that was
So
remarkable.
as I was going through the week reading all these different news reports, and let me just say, I didn't actually get wind of this until Thursday, thanks to the censorship that's going on. But that's but
Right.
on Thursday I figured it out, and then I searched all over and found a whole bunch of articles. And as I read them all, there's some conflicting information in different articles, and there's some that's just inaccurate. So now that I sent you this, maybe you can share this
Yeah,
with
I can pull it up.
viewers.
Let me know.
But this
got it up.
clarifies a lot of things. But there's a couple of points. Number one is this guy, Glenn Neal. He's a 42-year-old black male who went to prison when Phil Todd was only 14 years old. That's when he got sentenced and went to prison. He lived in North Carolina. So there was no point in time in which from age 0 to 14 that Phil Todd would have ever had cross paths with this guy. They didn't live in the same cities. They didn't live in the same states. He went to prison when Philip is 14 years old. He's in prison for almost 12 years, except for, you remember when they were letting everybody out of the jails in the middle of when the pandemic began, and they tried letting him out. And so that did not go over for very well, because in a very short amount of time, he was charged with a parole violation in Chicago and locked back up again. That was not mentioned in any of the media reports that I could see. They all gave the impression that he had been in prison the entire 12 years. But there was a short period that he was released on parole, but he violated that parole, which the violation makes you really question the reason that he was given this good time credit. So he did get out on Friday, only 24 hours before the attack. And he was got out a little bit early due to his
already out of jail for having attempted to murder Senator Paul Staffer. He's walking free right now.
No, he's back in. But what I'm saying is, 24 hours prior to the attack, he was got out of prison. Let me just say what he was in prison for. 12 years ago, he was charged with various different crimes. One of which was that he was holding 2 women hostage and forcing them to be prostitutes by physical force, whether they liked it or not. One of which was his own cousin. He was basically trafficking them, and he may have been doing it with other women. I don't know. But he had also been charged with some other, sexual violence, assaults, and robbery, and that kind of stuff. Just all around shady character. But this guy kidnapped his own cousin and forced her to prostitute herself, whether she liked it or not. So he did time in federal prison in Maryland. And when he violated his parole and went back to prison, it seems a little unusual that he's being considered such a great guy to get out again under the good time credit. He got out a little early on that, and I'm not 100% sure how that program works. I never really looked into it too closely, but I understand you get something like potentially up to 5 days credit per month of your remaining sentence if you have qualified and have been a really good boy in prison and such. And it did not sound like he was really that good of a person in the scenario. So it seems like the rules kind of gave someone some flexibility to get him out a little bit early, but probably most cases would not have done so if they had actually been diligent about looking at the case and deciding whether they should or not. But he gets out early. Now, if I had just spent most of the last 12 years behind bars, except for a few weeks or at the beginning of the pandemic, I would probably have other things that I would want to do with my freedom the very next day, besides go pick some random guy on the street to attempt to murder for no reason that I've never met before. But Phillip Todd had never met him, was a complete stranger. They had literally never lived in the same cities, so there was no possibility of them ever having crossed paths. And here he is, 24 hours after he gets out of 12 years in prison. He shows up right outside this particular restaurant that the Senate Homeland Security and Government Operations Committee's committee aide employee for the Republican caucus, who was supervised by Rand Paul, is having lunch. Now, how did he know he was there? That's a good question. But why did this guy standing out?
As with the case with that Democrat staffer that was murdered, there's no attempt to rob him or anything. It was just
no, there was no attempt to rob him. But the guy stands around outside this restaurant waiting for him and his friend Bernard, I believe, to finish eating dinner. And he's hiding behind a wall. There's a little corner there that they can kind of get behind. And several other people walk in and out. He doesn't do anything to anybody until Phillip Todd and his friend come out of the restaurant. And then when that happens, he just jumps on top of him, knocks him to the ground, and just starts wailing at him with a knife. Completely unprovoked. Nothing was said. Nothing was approached. There was no confrontation. It just instantly happened that way. There's video surveillance footage that the police got from 2 different places. It does not show any confrontation in any way whatsoever. You see the 2 of them walking out of the restaurant, and then this guy jumps him and he goes straight to the ground, and they just start slamming his. They see the arm going down, and then his friend of course tries to help and pushes him off of him. And in the struggle, there's a cell phone that this Glenn Neal had left at the scene. It had gotten blood on it, but Philip's friend is preoccupied with trying to save Philip's life. He's got all these stab wounds, and he's trying to put pressure on the wounds, and you only have 2 hands, so he couldn't even cover them all. But he's desperate. And some of the reports that I'd read in the news had said, and I'm not exactly sure how they are completely certain of this, but had said that he certainly would have died if they had waited for someone else to come out of the restaurant to begin putting pressure on those wounds. Because if he had not been standing right there to be able to immediately put pressure on, there were so many wounds that he most likely in all scenarios would probably have died right there on the spot. So there was no way that the friend would be able to have confronted or tried to chase after the attacker, because he would have had to choose between chasing the attacker or letting his friend die. Obviously, he's not going to let Philip die. So the attacker had the opportunity to get away. Well, if he had the opportunity to get away before police have arrived, before anybody else has come out of the restaurant, why did he leave this cell phone that he just acquired yesterday? I mean, he probably needs a cell phone. He got out of prison. He doesn't have any money. He just got it. I would think he would probably want to have that thing. But he just left it on the ground and just ran off without it, even though he had the opportunity to grab it. That's very strange. And so then of course, everybody comes out to see what the hell's going on, and the police show up and they do their investigation. Or they had sent Philip to the hospital, of course, and both his own cell phone and the attackers were there on the ground. And then they followed to the hospital with both phones, and the police asked Philip, which of these is yours? And so that they could know for sure which one was the other guy's. And so both of these phones go to the hospital, and then Glenn Neal's phone goes to the police, and they contacted the phone company to find out who it was belonged to, and that's how they got the address of his Yolanda Neal. So that's where they ended up arresting him. That arrest took place at 2 a.m. that night. So we have the incident happens just a little after 5, like 5:17 p.m. And then 2 a.m. that same night, Sunday morning at 2 a.m., the arrest is made. But they had gone over to Lolanda Neal's house and were questioning her. And the attacker knocked on the back door while the police were there, and then came back in. And so they then saw that he was wearing the same outfit that he had on in the video from earlier. So they arrested him and charged him with assault with attempt to murder. And that's pretty much the end of the police involvement. But
and according to this,
what's that?
And according to this, Glenn Neal said a voice was telling him that someone was going to get him for all the things he'd done. So he was waiting right there. So yeah, the voices in my head told me to murder this guy. It sounds like some Ciron type stuff.
Yeah, here's the exact quote in the police report. Detective Gong asked the defendant Neal what he did today. The defendant Neal replied with the words to the effect of, "A voice was telling him that someone was going to get him for all the things he'd done, so he was waiting right there to get the someone."
Why would he think that someone would be at a Mexican restaurant in some?
That's a really good question.
Part of DC.
But it seems to me
and
really a
happens
stretch.
To be a staffer for a Senate committee.
Yeah, it seems like a real stretch that this guy is just, he's trying to play himself off as being mentally ill and hearing voices in his head that are telling him to do terrible, evil things to some. Now, if you're crazy, yeah, voices in your head could potentially tell you to do something terrible, but they're going to either tell you to do something terrible to just the random person that's right in front of you, whoever that is, or it's going to be to someone you have had some kind of awareness of. You might get a crazy notion about a person that's in your head, but you don't get a crazy notion about a person you've never heard of, never met, complete total stranger, and then have this voice tell you, "Oh, I got to go find that person, and I got to go hunt them down, and I got to do something bad to them," when you've never had that person's name in your head to begin with for your voices to even be able to have it in their vocabulary.
And
so
it kind of
doesn't make any
goes.
sense.
Yeah, it kind of goes to, when they're in prison, could have some of these thoughts been, put into the guy's head? It seems conspiratorial, but if you look back at what the government's done with MK Ultra and things along those lines, this is the type of manipulation that goes on. You look at what happened with Epstein's suicide. These things go on behind bars. No one ever talks. So I'm sure it's possible that this guy just happened to randomly stand there and seek out this person for reasons other than them being a staffer. But it is pretty peculiar that
you had some other reason to doubt that, though, too, didn't you, Jeff?
My theory is this. I'm thinking potentially while he was in prison and wanting to get out early, that someone might have proposed an offer of a job to do a murder for hire. And it's just a theory.
Wait, hold on, though. Didn't you say there was something else that told you this isn't just a coincidence, like something involving Facebook? Am I misremembering here?
Well, that's another point. So the Department of Homeland Security has a sub-department within it that is currently given through a law enacted by Congress the authority. Of course, it's unconstitutional and it's not a valid law since it's unconstitutional, but they have been given the authority in the color of law to order social media platforms to censor certain content in the interest of Homeland Security and national security. So what I found very, very curious that happened to me personally this week is I have Phillip Todd. Phillip Todd is not on my Facebook friends list, but 6 of my friends are on his as mutual friends. And I have 4,610 mostly liberty-leaning, mostly supporters of Rand Paul on my Facebook friends list. So I would think if there was a national news story involving some kind of employee of Rand Paul or something connected to Rand Paul's name that has literally all the major news networks all putting out articles about it, and there's significant numbers of articles. Some of them have even done multiple articles with follow-up stories. I would think that at least one of those would have come across my feed. I would think that probably several dozen, perhaps a couple hundred of my 4,600 people that all support Ron and Rand Paul, I would think that some of them have shared those articles. But from Saturday until Thursday, I was completely 100% unaware that this had even happened in any way whatsoever. And it wasn't just censored from my Facebook feed. It was also censored from my Google News feed that comes up on my Android phone. And it was also censored from my Twitter account. And the Twitter account is a really interesting tell because, as you all know, Elon Musk has really been fighting the censorship agenda. And he's done the Twitter files release, and we've now had it revealed that agencies of our government, as well as political parties like the Democrat National Committee, have been instructing Twitter to censor this, censor that, whatever. Well, Elon Musk has been shutting all of that down to the most extent that he can. But one of the things that's still in operation of the censorship, and it's still being enforced at Twitter, is the Department of Homeland Security has this official office that has been given the authority and color of law to order, with legal ramifications, for Twitter to censor stuff. So the Department of Homeland Security is capable of currently getting Twitter to censor things, whether Elon Musk likes it or not, because his legal team says if you don't do this, you're going to get all kinds of liability and consequences. And so until their lawsuits on the matter are sorted out in court, right now, Twitter is still censoring things at the beholding of the Department of Homeland Security. But when they did the Twitter files release, the focus was on the FBI. The FBI was doing it, but they were doing it more in an informal and more of a they didn't have as much to back up why they were doing it, or they didn't have the law passed that explicitly gives the Department of Homeland Security some kind of pretend authority in the color of law. So there's a bigger legal fight with the Department of Homeland Security and Twitter for censorship than there is with all the other mess that was a scandal. And I think that the FBI's part of it was very much, that scandal was put out there so that everybody knows, oh, it's the FBI doing it. And I think that it's kind of a diversion tactic, because I think a bigger issue is the fact that we've had Congress allow the Department of Homeland Security to take upon themselves this authority that, we all know is illegal because of the Constitution. But when it's condoned by Congress and enacted as a congressional act and gives them that authority in the color of law, and it not only does that do that, it gags Elon Musk from being able to talk about it. He's not allowed to say, if someone asked him, did you censor this at the request of the Department of Homeland Security? He can be potentially fined and charged for saying so. It's all done in secret by a law passed by Congress. So we haven't heard about the Twitter censorship of the Department of Homeland Security nearly as much, because Elon Musk's got a deal with his attorneys telling you can't say this, you can't say that. So that's a fight that's still ongoing. I'm sure that Elon is putting in a serious fight with it, and hopefully we'll all eventually get rid of all this crap. But we have the Department of Homeland Security having this ability to censor not just Facebook, but Twitter as well, even though Twitter is trying to fight them on it. And so I find it very interesting that not only was my Facebook account censoring all of these news reports,
you were actually Facebook friends with the victim in this story.
No, but I did have 6 mutual friends. Okay. And I since sent them friend requests, and I even sent them a message.
Yeah, did you reach out to any of these mutual friends and ask them, hey, did you hear about this
I haven't had direct conversations yet. I was really trying to study the censorship more, because I've been dealing with a problem with my Facebook targeting me with some really, really creepy, frankly perverted psychological algorithms that I feel violated by in a big way. I'll get on that some other time. But I've been studying how they're doing the censorship for a few weeks now, and it's very creepy because in recent last few months here, all of these platforms have replaced their algorithms that do all of this stuff with AI-based algorithms. That now the algorithm itself learns how to manipulate people and change how it acts on the fly. And I've seen it do it, and I've seen how it does it. So it's becoming much more complicated than it was. But what's really interesting is on Thursday, Steve Carra had posted a completely unrelated post on Facebook, but and he didn't put any of these links to any of these articles. And it's the links that they're using as the trigger mechanism for the censorship. But he had mentioned the attack in his post, just in the text of the post. So that slipped through the censors, so I was able to gain awareness of it. And I'm like, holy crap, how did I not know about this for 6 days? So I went and did a Google search, looked up all the articles, and started reading them. As soon as I had opened in my browser the articles that were being censored, then they stopped being censored for me. But they stopped being censored at the exact same time on both platforms, because at that Thursday afternoon, I started seeing other people's shares of all these different posts on both Facebook and Twitter. So once you've opened in your browser one of the censored links, then this censorship algorithm knows that you already have an awareness of the censored thing. So it no longer targets you for the censorship because it's trying to trick you into not believing that it is censored, because now you can see it. And so I've been studying that. I put 10 of the links on both platforms, and I've been counting how many people say they can see it, and just asking people, is this in your feed? And what I'm noticing when I reach out and message the people who are seeing it, have you heard of this story before you saw this post? In most cases, yes. In a couple of cases, no. And I'm still trying to figure out what exactly is happening there. But it seems that in the overwhelming majority of cases, once their system has identified that you already have seen one of these articles, whether you saw it on the platform or off the platform, if you just open up in your web browser and Google it and say, search for it and open up one of these articles, now that your browser, browsers have that what do they call it? The meta, there's a agent ID or whatever that the server gets an identifier for your browser that's unique to, they have your IP address, but they also have something unique about your computer that can allow them to, on a cross-platform basis on different sites, know that the same user has been there versus on another platform having been there. So once you've actually opened one of the links from any source, then it changes how all of these platforms are treating you and treating your feed propagation, and it'll now start to allow those through that weren't being allowed before. Because from Thursday on, I've been seeing all kinds of links about it, whereas I wasn't seeing any from Saturday until Thursday. So I find that very interesting. But I would have expected that from Facebook, because Facebook has been targeting me with all kinds of censorship to the point where it's basically made itself useless to me. But I wasn't expecting it. What's that?
But Twitter's doing the same thing, you're saying.
At Twitter, I saw that it had censored this particular thing, whereas I have been getting a lot less censorship overall from Twitter. On Twitter, a few weeks ago, I conducted a test. I scrolled down both platforms for 60 minutes straight and counted the number of relevant or informative links of things that I had not previously been aware of. And in an hour on Facebook with 4,610 friends, I had 4 things that I didn't already know that I thought were actually informative and meaningful. That's how screwed up they've gotten my feed to be so manipulated and censored. They're filling it with a bunch of crap. Over on Twitter, in the first 5 minutes, I had 24 different topics that I had not been aware of before. So the censorship has been greatly reduced on Twitter, thanks to Elon Musk, and greatly increased on my Facebook account in recent months in an extreme way. So I had gotten the impression from Twitter that in about 5 minutes or so, I feel like I've caught myself up to speed on all the current events going on in the world and any important issues that I need to be aware of. And that's how I prefer to feel. I prefer to feel like I know what's going on.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I don't
prefer to
feel
go
like
out
that.
and look
on
for news
Facebook.
stories too. Because
But
you can't just trust the social network to spoon feed them. And let me just take
Yeah,
a moment
right.
then, folks, to remind
That-
everybody the best place to find out about all of the stories that you're not getting from the mass media is, of course, on this very channel. So be sure that you like and share and subscribe
Yeah,
to our
I
video
should have
feeds
done.
wherever you're
I should have
watching,
gone
whether
to
you're
your.
watching on Rumble, where you should be watching, or Facebook or YouTube or Twitter. We are streaming on all of those platforms right now. So we'll be happy to address any comments in the chat you guys might have. And I am watching all the chats, including even on Rumble, where we have more viewers apparently than we have on Facebook or YouTube. But that's good. That's a good sign, you know.
On the social media front, I found that by kind of bypassing the main big tech media platforms, getting on Signal and Telegram, and even niche platforms like Gab or Truth Social, it's much easier to get content that is not mainstream approved, either from people, a community of people that of activists that or just through the algorithms on Gab and Truth Social, which seem to be, if anything, they're skewed more on the conservative end rather than the liberal end, like all the big tech platforms are.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Shane, you mentioned mainstream approved. That's another point I want to make. Haven't you noticed, at least I've noticed, that when all of these different companies and all the different people who are in cahoots with the censorship agenda, haven't you noticed that they all are kind of usually in lockstep with each other? If something is censored on Facebook and censored on Twitter, it's usually stuff that the mainstream news media outlets are downplaying or diverting or not even covering at all, or they might run like one little blip on their website and that's it. In this particular case, we see a very different approach. We see all of the mainstream news media sites are publishing significant amounts of reporting with significant detail, and some of them are even following up with a second report, interviewing Philip's parents and whatever else a few days later. So they are putting a lot of coverage out there on mainstream websites of mainstream news media companies, and yet it's something that, until you've seen one of those pages, is completely censored on a lot of people's Facebook and Twitter accounts. And I find that inconsistency to be very unusual, because usually you would expect that the mainstream media sites are also downplaying or hiding the issue, or not even covering it at all, when it's something that the social media platforms are censoring, especially if it's something that the FBI or the DHS or whoever else asked them to, or told them to. So doesn't it seem odd to you that we would have all of this coverage and yet we would still have social media platforms censoring it, and specifically Twitter still censoring it, which does not want to under Elon Musk? And so with that happening, it kind of tells me that it's on DHS's list of ordering Twitter to censor it. I can't
the other
prove
question
that.
too is why would this story need to be censored at all anyway?
Exactly.
I mean,
Why
a
would it
random
be?
Senate staffer gets stabbed in Washington D.C.?
Right.
That's,
well,
which is what they're going by. That's the story according to them.
Exactly. It seems very strange to me that we have a scenario where the staffer, if my hunch or theory turns out to be in any way correct, that maybe he was getting too close to finding some information out that was so bad and so wrong within the Department of Homeland Security that somebody corrupt might have put out a hit on him and wanted to arrange this. If that was the case, isn't it very strange that the very same agency has the ability to censor it from Twitter, that any report of the attack itself having even occurred, when mainstream news media is not censoring it across all of their websites? Now, I do have a question, because I don't watch TV anymore, but I have talked to a few friends I understand there hasn't been much on the actual broadcasts. Is that true? I know Fox has broadcasts on television about it. Have any of the other mainstream news media companies broadcast on television about this report, or has it only been on their websites?
I couldn't say. I mean, we did see there was a clip from Fox and Friends in that one article I brought up, so I don't know how much other networks have covered it. But at any rate,
I was wondering if that was
Jeff,
something.
We do need to move on since we spent 45 minutes on the story, but that's extraordinary to me, man. Jeff, you're welcome to stick around and hang out as we talk about some other topics tonight.
So I just wanted to clarify. I found this Superior Court for the District of Columbia Criminal Division, United States versus Neil Glenn Paul, and it basically is the criminal complaint copied and pasted from the police report, mostly.
Sure.
And when I read this, it clarified a lot of things that were previously some of the media reports were confusing and vague or conflicting information. After reading this, I feel a little bit less confident that my theory or my worst fear is correct, but I still think that that's my hunch and what my theory is what it is. But about the potential of there being some information that maybe Philip got too close to finding, and
apparently he'll make a full recovery, so maybe we'll find out someday. Although there is another reason
thank God
why there might be censorship on this, and that goes back to where we started on the story, which is that this is also. Oops, let me get that. Sorry, I got that.
It's wonderful news.
This whole notion that violent criminals should be released early. The guy wasn't out 24 hours; he was already out trying to murder people.
Right,
so
and it's crazy.
Although you would think the anti-Trump angle alone would be enough to qualify that for an exemption. Oh yeah, look at this.
Wasn't the First Step Act for nonviolent offenses, though?
Well, that's how it was billed, but Ann Coulter kind of drove a stake through that. I remember reading an article from her saying that this would inevitably be applied to violent criminals, and that's obviously what's happened here. You give the people in charge of the system an inch, they'll take a mile. That's why the idea of criminal justice reform isn't all that it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, the other thing too is whenever they say, "Oh, we're just going to release people who are using marijuana from federal prisons," it's like, well, wait a minute. Except there's this thing called plea bargaining, and just because you're in prison for having or distributing marijuana doesn't mean that's all that you did. And it might be that you had a much more violent charge for a much more violent crime you committed, and they bargained down to, "Oh, we'll just put you in prison for marijuana."
Well, Kim Kardashian.
So they say, "Oh, we're just releasing non-violent people," huh?
So Kim Kardashian said it was for nonviolent. So.
Oh well, if Kim Kardashian said it, then
she was involved with it. Wasn't she involved with it?
She sure was. She sure was.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right, go ahead, Shane. I think you wanted to say
something.
Something.
I just wanted to say I think that this line about him having voices in his head, I think that was a sales pitch to get him to do the job. Oh, if you tell the police right when you're first arrested that you hear voices, then you'll be able to do a mental illness defense and you'll get off easy. And I think that might have been what convinced him to agree to take the job, if it is a job.
And what but remember what they said, remember when the neighbor attacked Rand Paul, he had posted all kinds of crazy pro Bernie stuff, violent threats against Republicans and violent rhetoric on his social media page, and he was given a slap on the wrist. He said, there was some debris nearby, and that's why I tackled Rand Paul and could have potentially killed him. And he got a slap on the wrist. I think they added some charges later, but still he served barely any jail time. And it's a laugh line. So the double standard's incredible.
Yeah. There was the shooting at the baseball game, where Rand was one of the players. There was the BLM incident with him and his wife, where they just surrounded him and just crowded into him, screaming at them until they couldn't even move. It's clear that I think Rand is probably running a little scared with all of the threats. In fact, I kind of question if there's possibility. I'm kind of worried that Rand might have been threatened in follow up to this incident. It's just a hunch, but
Let's not speculate.
I
Well-
have a theory, Jeff. I have a theory that when they injected the prisoner with the vaccine, they put 5G
boy.
in it, and then they
Oh.
radiated the messages through the 5G
All
for
right.
him
Well,
to kill.
I'm just saying it's interesting that Rand Paul has been
Careful,
asking
man. They're going to
the
take you literally for having said that.
that they've been, Rand Paul has been asking the media reporters and journalists to try to avoid mentioning Philip's name and try to give them privacy. And many of them respected that. Some of them did not. Many of them did run the name anyway. But all of them have not mentioned his role in the job and his role with the committee, as opposed to they're just giving the impression that he works in the office. And so I think Rand is really trying to steer the media attention away from having the words Homeland Security have anything in the news about this in any way whatsoever. I think he's trying to prevent that.
I'd be surprised if that was true. I'd be surprised if Rand was interested in doing that. It wouldn't surprise me if the media was interested in not reporting that.
I know for a fact that Rand has been trying to prevent them from mentioning anything specific about Philip or his role with the committee. But why, I don't know. But I do think it's kind of questioning, because I've heard people tell me, like the people have told me that he's been doing that, and I've also read
People
it
with personal knowledge.
Secondhand, yes.
Okay, I don't know how much stock I have to place in that.
Okay, well, don't put as much in it, but I don't know. I just find it strange that nobody's talking about the fact that this employee has something to do with the Homeland Security Committee, and I kind of think maybe somebody told Rand Paul, you better make sure that's not said. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I hope I'm wrong, but I kind of think he might be running a little scared. That's just my view.
Well, there you go. All right. Well, anyway, I do want to move on from this topic. We do have other things we got to talk about this week. In fact, I even did a whole show on Friday just to talk about the Restrict Act, which is an even greater infringement on social media freedom than what you just described, Jeff. I mean, it's literally given the government carte blanche to censor anything on social media they don't like. So we talked about that. And of course, the indictment of Donald Trump, the forthcoming indictment of Donald Trump, which, I don't think I have any more to say than what we talked about on Friday about the messaging, but it does just drive me bonkers that even the people who are most sympathetic to Trump are getting just completely lost in the messaging on this. And no one's going back to talking about the basis for this whole thing, which is that Donald Trump was the victim of blackmail by a Democrat operative who is now in jail for blackmail, and Stormy Daniels, who has now confessed it was all a lie. And they're still going after him on this stuff. It's like, wait a minute, that was an operation that you guys tried and failed in. and Trump's only crime was that he agreed to be blackmailed rather than have the false allegation come out. They put it out anyway. No one charges Stormy Daniels. Nobody charges Michael Avenatti for this, at least. And they just go right on their merry way. Now they're going to indict Donald Trump on the basis of the fact that he couldn't possibly have had any personal reason for not wanting a false allegation about his marriage to come out. I mean, it's just lunacy. And even the most pro-Trump people on this are like using the same Democrat buzzwords: hush money to a porn star, hush money to a porn star. Folks, it's not hush money if you didn't do the crime in the first place. That's just being blackmailed. That's all it is.
They have all these reports. Oh, over 30 criminal charges. Nobody's telling us what those criminal charges are. But they're really hyping up that there's more than 30. And now I read reports that the judge may give him Trump a gag order, so he can't even tell us what the 30 charges are. Now that's just absurd.
That's what Martin Armstrong, I think, was talking about being the next thing, is the judge going to put some kind of gag order on Trump and then use some kind of pretextual reason to throw him in jail. Because they cannot help themselves.
It's so ridiculous. CNN's got this whole section on their website for live coverage of the updates of the indictment of Donald Trump, and it's got this little animated a red dot as though it's like something live fading in and out of red, fading on red dot, and it's nothing. There's nothing moving. There's nothing happening. The indictment happened. It's done. There is no more indictment. It's done.
Well, there'll be
it's like a
more surprise on Tuesday.
live ongoing coverage of this ongoing indicting
Oh,
process.
it's going to be their entire thing to not talk about anything else that's going on, like say a radical transgender murdering a bunch of Christians the other day. There was that story, which gets us back to the other issue. You know, the legislature's been out of session for a week. They're going to be out of session for another week. When they come back, the number one thing is going to be pushing red flag legislation, which is another attempt at mob justice, another attempt at sanctioning conservatives in general, because they're the ones that are more likely to own guns, and say, oh, so and so said such and such, therefore we need to confiscate all their firearms. It's going to be another weaponization of the legal system. But it does strike me though that in the context of what was in the news right up until the shooting was the increased violent radicalization of transgenders. And there was the planned day of vengeance in Washington, or maybe it was going to be 3 days, which fizzled out, I think only because of what happened. There was the story on NPR about transgenders wanting to get armed because of the perceived violence against them, which turns out is another hoax. And, it leads me to wonder if there isn't another angle on this that we could talk about, which is, you know what? Turnabout's fair play, folks. And if they pass that red flag law, I hope you guys are all on social media taking screenshots of every violent thing that the Democrats, that the leftists post on social media, which they post constantly, all the time.
The only problem is we can't take away their guns because they don't have it.
They have guns.
Some of them do. And that doesn't mean you can't get an extreme risk protection order against them. Doesn't mean you might want to put a, put a thing on the police radar about it. I'll tell you what, I found out that the police apparently have a flag on me. And that if they need to use extreme caution if they come to my house. And the reason why is because I have a sticker on my front door that says concealed carry welcome. And that's all it took. That's all it took. Yeah, let's let them see how they enjoy being put on a list. Now, I don't know if that's going to be anything that. Go ahead, Shane.
A lot of these people, I mean, especially you see at these, when they do the drag queen grooming events, there'll be a bunch of Antifas outside the door, looking paramilitary with assault rifles. There's more of the militancy creeping into the LGBT movement as the T in particular becomes more deranged as their ideology spreads, and there's more people, and the suicide rates are going up, and there's violence within the community. They look for other people to blame. So you are seeing more armed people on the left, and definitely if they're going to do it to us, we should be watching them too, because because as we saw last week, the hatred against Christians is very real. That the transgender person obviously targeted that Christian school because they hated Christianity. The manifesto is being withheld from the public, probably because it's really, really bad. Why would they possibly withhold that, other than because it has a narrative in it that they don't want the public to find out about? Yep, and it shows, should show Christians that they should be exercising their Second Amendment rights more, buying guns while they still can, and going to the range and learning the practical skills, because we know that the police they can show up and maybe mitigate some of the damage, but they're going to be minutes away when you only have seconds. So the only answer the left has is to take more guns away, make you defenseless, make more gun-free zones where people can be sitting ducks. So people need to take their own self-defense into account. And there's this in this sick society, it's like an open-air insane asylum. That's the only thing you can do to even have a little semblance of being safe, not just feeling safe. I mean, the issue is, to me, that whenever you see violence become pervasive in a society, whether it's whether it's the fascists in Italy, or whether it's the Taliban in the Middle East, it's when they get a permission slip from the government that they go absolutely crazy. And when there was lynch mobs in this country, it was because they knew they had the permission from the government. No one would stop them.
And that's the impression the left has right now, that the Justice Department will protect them. They can burn down cities. They can burn down police precincts. They can occupy courthouses. They can occupy whole city blocks. And at worst, they'll get released without bail. And nobody's put a stop to it. And that's the impression that they get. And they're going to be more and more and more violent until at some point the government says, no, we're going to actually charge people with rioting. We're not just going to prosecute the people that try to defend themselves.
Yep, it's government sanctioned violence, and you see it when the FBI will call so-called white supremacists or white Christian extremists the number one terror threat, and then just look the other way when entire cities are ransacked by Antifa or BLM, like in 2020. Still continues to this day. I think in Atlanta there was incredible amounts of coordinated Antifa violence.
Yeah, there was a terrorist attack.
Yes, a terror attack, and it's completely swept under the rug. And the FBI still won't name Antifa as a major terror threat. So it's government sanctioned violence. It all dovetails into what's going on with all the train derailments and the chemical spills. It's total war against our civilization.
Yes, somehow parents going to school board meetings are terrorists, but Antifa is not.
Yes.
Oh,
so
right.
they're after us for sure.
Yeah, I mean, even that to me is an impermissible chilling of free speech, that the Justice Department is going after parents speaking out at school boards over their concerns that child pornography is being distributed where it is in these places, and their response is not to crack down on the people distributing child pornography, it's to crack down on the parents complaining about it. It's unbunbelievable.
Yeah, and the National Education Association's behind it. The teachers unions are all calling for it. There's there's an entire apparatus in place on the I don't even want to say the far left. It's really the new mainstream left that's driving the Democrat Party, that they want ordinary parents to be made to feel like they're a threat, that they don't want to fight back against this. They believe that the children are their property, that they are to be indoctrinated. They already they have a lot of momentum on their side, so they're going to keep putting their foot on the gas pedal, especially considering there's no consequences from the federal government and most state governments or local governments either.
Yeah, we have here in Caro, the library had a big mess with a couple hundred people showing up at the library board meeting, bitching about all of this crap that's just frankly inappropriate and put right on display in the children's section of trying to confuse them into believing that they can be the other gender when they're it's made for 5 and 6 year old kids, and it's ridiculous. But some of the stuff, it's just straight up giving them stories about inappropriate parent and child relationships and stuff, like sex with a minor that they presented as being a kind of something they should do in order to fit in, and so of course caused a big huge stink. And here's the thing: we have all our local people who show up at the library board meeting bitching about this, and they're drowned out by people who aren't even from Caro, that came from all over the state. They brought in a couple hundred people that these Democrats organized and brought in from outside our county to drown out the voice of the local people who actually pay for this library. And so it's very frustrating that we're not allowed to have our voice heard on our own meetings, because they're gonna bombard all their stuff, and they're gonna charge our parents with going to school board meetings with being a terrorist. But if we try to talk about an issue in our community that these people caused, they're going to bring all these people in that aren't even our people, aren't even from our community, and they're going to try to tell us what to do. So
there's no local, there's no local control. And there's the case of the west side of the state where the city voted to refund or to rescind the bonds for a library that was showing pornographic content to children. So what did they do? They made a GoFundMe, and then perverts from across the country gave them all the money that they could to continue showing the pornographic content to children. So there's really, they've undermined federalism. They've undermined local control. You have no more local control. It is
Well,
the groomer industrial
you have
complex.
the
I like to
control
call
of
it.
taking back your library board. At least there's that. And I would say to people, keep at it. And Bill Hamilton mentions this. Same thing happened in Lapeer. I was there at that one a few weeks ago, and yeah, it was the same story. A lot of radicals came in who weren't clearly were not from Lapeer. As it happened, they were totally still outnumbered by the people in Lapeer. And in fact, after a whole bunch of them got up and said, "Oh, I read this book and there's nothing wrong with it," and then the county prosecutor comes up and says, "Oh yeah, this is," and I literally don't want to even describe it for you guys because we are on YouTube. And as you said, like, this is stuff that, and after he describes in graphic detail what is in these books, he says, look, this is something that you couldn't show on the news, you couldn't show on social media. If you had the contents of those books on your phones, you could be charged with possession of CP. And the whole room just erupted in applause. And at that point, we were like, okay, yeah, we won this argument because they're outnumbered, no question about it. And I mean, what are they going to do? Trot around the entire state to every library board meeting for the next year? It's not going to work that way. So we got to keep on this, people. Keep on your library boards and your school boards. And, at the end of the day, run candidates if you need to. You've got, quote unquote moderates who are allowing this stuff to go on. It's an easy message to run against.
Yeah, and in Walled Lake, they formed the Walled Lake Citizens for Parental Rights, and so they got people elected, but it didn't just stop there. It wasn't just, oh, we're going to get them elected, we're going to go home. We're going to have a group that constantly advocates for sanity, for better curriculums against the crazy left-wing indoctrination. And you need to develop these new structures because it's not just getting a library board official elected or a school board official elected. There's a whole, there's an institutional power structure. Like I said, with the NEA, the unions, they're going to come at the LGBT groups. They're going to come after anyone who stands strong. So we need to have our own institutions that will do this battle in the public eye day in and day out. And that's how we're able to get our power back. But it's going to take a lot of organizational effort, and not just getting them elected, but having the groups and going to every one of these meetings, constantly fighting the good fight, because this is war.
Yeah, I mean, the whole message in all of this and all of these things that the left are doing is to try to, I mean, it's terrorism. They're trying to get you to stop. They're trying to threaten everybody with legal actions, with violence, with getting you fired from your job. All of it is designed to do one thing, and that's to get you to stop doing it. And the thing there's nothing they are more concerned about than legitimate political activity. And so they're doing everything they can to try to get people to go violent. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the video. There was the demonstration in Washington that was going to be the Trans Day of Vengeance, and so it was just like one group of FBI people beating up the other group of FBI people. It was just a joke. It was so bad. It was like 10 people there. It was ridiculous. But all of it, I mean, they're trying to get people fired up into being ineffective, rather than being able to go out and knock on doors and say, look, this is what the Democrats are doing. They're talking about, I mean, number one, denying you due process rights. They're talking about being able to sue anybody they want over any I mean, they're talking about reparations now in Washtenaw County. And I got to tell you, that's not popular with a lot of people who just don't know how extreme this stuff is. And of course, the best tool for giving people the facts about their lawmakers is the report cards on Operation Watchdog, which you can all now, by the way, create your own scorecards if you like, but we have ours. And it's got the rundown for every lawmaker. And it's even got, if you click on any one of them, let's pick on, let's see here. Who do I want to pick on? What's her face? Jamie Churches. There's the legislative record of Jamie Churches. There's all the bills she's sponsored. She's co-sponsored. I'm sure that the voters in that district who elected her by 1% are going to love seeing all these things that she's actively supporting and voting for, including, of course, trying to block the income tax cut that was going to pass automatically. And by the way, if you guys don't know, the end of that story was that the Senate did actually end up not giving it immediate effect. And so we did get the income tax cut. But nonetheless, it still was spending $3 billion all in special interest deals. And of course, all the abortion stuff, the transgender stuff, right to work. We've talked about all those things. And, you know, some of the things that they're talking about sponsoring are things that people are like, hey, that sounds kind of weird. Like this bit about allowing an automatic payroll deduction to be sent to political PACs. I think a lot of voters are probably like, that sounds a little strange. Expanding privileges of government workers on strike. That seems a tad odd.
Is it not allowed right now? The political PAC, you can't tell, you have your employer send one right now.
Here's what the bill does. I'll pull it up here.
I didn't even know that was illegal.
Yeah, look at this. This is the restriction they're removing. It says all of the political committees and independent committees established by a single national or international labor organization, by a labor organization of that national or international labor organization, by a local labor organization of that national, international, or by any other subordinate organization, are treated as a single independent committee. All of the political committees and independent committees established by a state central body are essentially one political committee. That's all being removed. And then they add in this part: expenditures made by a corporation in the ordinary cause of business or to provide for the collection or transfer of contributions established by a labor organization do not constitute an in-kind contribution, and a labor organization may make an independent expenditure in any amount advocating for the election or defeat of a candidate. So they can now freely lobby entirely. And the prohibition under this subsection includes, but is not limited to, using or authorizing public resources to establish a payroll deduction plan to directly or indirectly distribute the money to these PACs. That prohibition is now removed. So that's all in there. In fact, it expressly says if an advance payment or reimbursement to cover the cost of using public resources or to make an expenditure to a committee, that's all fine. That's all totally fine. So that's what that bill does. There it is.
Definitely shouldn't be using public resources. Good grief.
Yeah, they want to use public resources to allow your paychecks to be literally spent directly on political campaigns at the direction of the labor bosses, of course. So, you know, all that remains, folks, is for you guys to put some of this information on a piece of paper or, you know, put it into a text message and start letting people know, start letting voters know right away. I mean, we have 1 week to get one Democrat no vote on red flag. And I would do everything possible. Heck, I would even text the transgender people and tell them, hey, this is going to take away your right to bear arms, because it will.
Which Democrats do you think would be the most likely that we could possibly try to convince, like most reluctant to this agenda in the first place?
Well, usually the ones that are most vulnerable, the ones that had the weakest election victories, like Jamie Churches, except she's crazy, Betsy Kofia maybe in Traverse City, Jen Hill in Marquette, a lot of gun owners in the Marquette area, and she barely won. So people like that. But I would also say, go local. And if you don't have any Democrats in your district whatsoever, you know what? You still got to talk to people about this stuff, because voters need to know how extreme all these Democrats are, because their votes count in the presidential race, in the U.S. Senate race. So, I mean, that's an important thing too. You know, there was a false impeachment of Donald Trump, 2 of them, and not a single Democrat was opposed to that amazing abuse of the legal system, and in doing so to remove a sitting president, and at one point to remove someone who after he wasn't even president anymore. But these are all crazy things, and they're not stopping. They're going crazier and crazier and crazier. Oh yeah, we can remove a sitting president for something that's not a crime. Well, now we can charge him for something that's not a crime after the fact. I mean, it's just ludicrous. And the problem is that a lot of voters, especially in the COVID age, have self-isolated. As you say, they're censoring everything on social media, so people have to deliver the facts to them. Like, here's how they're voting, and why isn't the media telling you about this stuff? And everything in politics is geographical. That's why you have to do it locally. You have to canvass your precinct, and you can find at least 10 people or more in every single precinct in Michigan. They're going to want to connect and going to want to get involved, and they just have to be reached out to. And the way to do that is geographically, methodically, knocking on doors. That's the key to all of this stuff. Is
The weather is getting nice, and
it is.
These off years are a good time to go and reach people and kind of develop those relationships. You can talk to people. I mean, most of the times, the vast majority of the time, you don't get the door slammed down your face. People really appreciate that you are civically engaged, that you are involved, that you're well informed, that you're taking a stand. Even if they don't necessarily agree with you, they kind of respect that you're willing to do this, and then that becomes contagious. If they're willing to talk to you, if they're like-minded or semi-like-minded, can invite them to a meeting, invite them out to coffee, get them kind of their foot in the door, and that's how we grow the activist space. That's how we change minds. We're obviously not getting any support from the mainstream media, big tech, even though Twitter has gotten better, but still it's an overwhelming big brother type apparatus designed to suppress our messages and promote the messages of our opponents. So the only way we can get through that is by reaching people door to door, or flyering at popular events or other things like that. That's how we get around the incredible amount of surveillance and the big brother apparatus that's being put in place to suppress our messages.
Yeah, I think we seem to have lost Patty and Jeff now. Just too bad. I wanted to. Maybe Patty's back. I want to see if she wants to talk about this. Something funny is going on in her neck of the woods, and see if she wants to talk about that this week, because there's a lot of. Well, we talked a few weeks ago about sort of a strange thing that there's a group that just calls themselves the MIGOP.info, which people think is the Michigan Republican Party, but it's not. And the state party is not doing much to distance itself from that, apparently. But there's something kind of going on there. So that's
the Telegram group, right?
Looks like we got
we're back.
The gang is back.
Yeah. Hey, Patty, do you want to talk about?
I got tired of looking at my face. I don't know if I want to get into it this week. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know you gave me a good lead in, but
all right. Well, we can talk about it maybe another time. But yeah, there's a lot of
good old Wickrick, baby.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So be aware, folks. Not every GOP is a GOP. Let's put it that way.
Just gotta identify as one, and then
Yeah.
But even I'm not really talking necessarily about any specific county, but if you do have just a Republican club or a Republican group or freedom-minded group or liberty group, you can do some great work even without having any sort of real power, just by being able to organize individuals. So,
I mean, I would just say, if you want to be a political organization, why in the world did you want to be the Republican organization if you can help it?
Yeah, name it anything else except Republican.
Yeah. Wayne County Patriots or something like that. Rescue Michigan Coalition. That is a nice catchy name to it. Right. Well, anyway, maybe we'll talk about that another time. But what else has been going on this week? God, I feel like that's a lot. We've been going for more than an hour, and I did a whole show on Friday too, so maybe that's enough.
Hey, Mindy.
Jeff, you look. I don't know if you were adjusting your microphone or camera or what. Is everything going okay, man? All right, Jeff, I'm going to mute you again because apparently things are not all okay. Anyway, what else? Shane, tell us about what else has been going on. Haven't seen you in a while. I know Oakland County is a battle. Put it that way.
Well, I mean, I can't complain. Everything's going pretty good. With my political action committee, Grand New Party, we had a training seminar last week. 100 people filled it up. A lot of more people wanted to get in. It was pretty good in terms of different leaders saying here's practical ways you can get involved on the ground. Here's kind of a hopeful message that despite our problems that we're having, there's a lot of hope in local politics, school board candidates that are getting elected, the possibilities of, challenging, taking it, we talked about taking it into the sheriff, county sheriff, and to talk to them about the gun control that's happening, and like similar to what happened in Illinois, where the sheriffs said that we will not we will not enforce any gun control here in any of these counties, regardless of what the state says. That's something that activists can talk to their sheriffs about to make sure that they know that they should not enforce those unconstitutional laws against the Bill of Rights and the Second Amendment. Talked about that, talked about the possibility of, doing outreach and then kind of exposing, where the government, your officials stand. And then if they aren't doing the right thing by the Constitution, organizing.
The other
at the local
person
level to
has
get rid of
called
them.
caption.
And that has been, it's worked, especially at the school board level. We have a lot of successes around the state, Ottawa County, they really cleaned house there. So you can make it happen. It might not always be easy. It might take a while, but local activism is how you can have success. We've seen it time and again, a lot of success, especially in like the precinct delegate organizational level, in the different, groups that are county district, state committee, state GOP. Seen the power of organization, and obviously there's some speed bumps, and it's going to be rocky road to a certain extent, but it just shows how organizational power can really make all the difference, and when it's done right and at the local level. So that's what we talked about. Had some successful dinner events too. So very happy with how that's going. And in Oakland County, I think things are turning around here, at least within the movement, in terms of who's in charge. It's going to get worse before it gets better, but I think you're seeing some improvements. So I'm pretty happy with, considering the situation, pretty happy with how everything's going.
Yeah. I mean, I think we got to think back from November 2024. And what's the environment we want to have when the next election rolls around? And the answer is having organizations in every precinct. They're going to be able to knock on doors. And I think I'm about ready to call it a stream on that. Although Mindy just posted this. I have created a team with Farmington area Republicans called Conservative Community Action Team, goal to get people involved in city and library events, get people on boards and commissions in Farmington and Farmington Hills, and get people to attend city meetings and Board of Ed meetings. That's outstanding. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when John Riley, before he ran for office, he organized a local group, ended up getting him elected. They ended up replacing people on their town council, and then after that, even took back a library board. And that's how it's got to go, folks. A lot of these elected officials are just not used to having any kind of scrutiny, and that's unfortunately the environment we came into. No, they don't like it at all, do they? They certainly don't
like it.
Yeah, you can't take the heat. Get out of the kitchen, I say.
Yep, and a lot of them, under that heat, they will, implode. So you got to pressure them. You can't just let them get away with it, because that's how we lose. They want us to be demoralized and throw in the towel and be like, oh, what's the point? I'm gonna quit, or I'm gonna move out of the state. And you have to dig in your heels at this time and fight harder than ever. Yeah, we had a school board member resign because I guess she didn't like being called names, and it's like, well, guess what? That's kind of how this goes. So, all right, guys. Well, with that, I think we're gonna call it a stream for the week, and who knows, we might have another one during the week again if the next week is as crazy as this one has been. But I don't know. I've been feeling bad. We haven't done hardly any Rescue Michigan emails this week, and there's still plenty of action alerts to go around. So hopefully I find more time this week, because we've got the red flag bills, we've got national popular vote. And that's a whole other topic too. So there you go. So
Twain.
Paula says, see you on Tuesday. That's right. If you want more of this kind of content, that reminds me, we also put this back on this.
I'll see you on Tuesday too, Paula.
Yeah, we have our Operation Watchdog weekly calls Tuesdays at 7. So tune in. You can go to rescuemichigan.com, sign up for Operation Watchdog, and you can see us there. All right, that'll do it for this week. Thanks, guys. Thanks all of you for tuning in. And until next time, I'm going to try bringing Jeff back on one more time, although he was having phone issues. No, he's still having phone issues. So,
that was quick.
all right. All right. See y'all next week, guys. Thanks for all you do.